How's everybody? Uh-oh. Be careful, be careful.
Finna cause an accident.
Eddie Carrington, mayor of Flux City. And I am a developer that started from single-family fix and flips. And from that experience, I was able to level up to this. And I don't have any professional commercial development experience. I just believed in myself, put a play together, and here we are. So we're gonna get you inside here shortly. Did everybody get off the bus? Yeah. All right, let's move into the first floor here. Thank you, man.
Last bit of existing wall.
I don't know if we're gonna see. Okay. All right, gonna buy you lunch if you get off.
All right, now, what you want me to get?
Myself as well as the crowd, and don't necessarily go too,
Take your time.
whatever you think is best.
Take your time, brother.
Appreciate you guys. All right, come closer, I guess, so we can make sure we have enough space for everybody to get in. Eddie Carrington. I am the mayor/founder of Flux City Development, and my background is once again single-family fix and flips. I have about 15 years of buying, selling, rehabbing, some wins, some losses. I have signed over properties back over to the land bank as one example of taking an L, right? So I just always make sure I let everybody I know, or everybody I talk to know that obviously, you don't always win in this realm when it comes to real estate. But I kept pushing, and I always wanted to do larger projects, but I never necessarily felt that I was capable of doing so until one day I was introduced to Cliff Brown. And I snuck into one of those Detroit homecoming events, and Cliff Brown was presenting the Cove in West Village. And when I saw Cliff Brown presenting, I think he had a hoodie on with a blazer with some Jordans on, I'm like, wow. I really, really appreciated the exposure to him, indirectly through, this event that I went to. And that kind of expanded my horizon a bit, my thought of what I was able to accomplish based off of seeing, me and him. So just a bit back a little bit. So when I was introduced to real estate when I was a banker, and there were a lot of people at the bank that I worked at, my clients that worked at the big three, and they looked at real estate as their retirement, not their pension, not Social Security. And based off of what they were able to accomplish and their confidence in putting in place formats to invest in real estate and kind of look at it as a long-term retirement play, that was kind of my first initial introduction to real estate. And so I use those two examples just to basically say that I was introduced to real estate in these different formats. And if it weren't for those events, I wouldn't be here, right? And so therefore, I'm so happy that Reed is doing what they're doing, because this gives you an opportunity to hopefully see you and me. And I say that because I'm not here to say that I'm just this great developer. I want you to look at me and say, hey, look, if that guy can do it, I can do it too, right? So with that said, we are standing in the ribbon at East English Village, and we got this project through an RFP. Invest Detroit initiated an RFP back in February of 2020. And this was an opportunity for me to level up, right? This wasn't my first RFP I submitted a proposal on, but based off of the previous RFPs that I submitted, I learned from those experiences. And one of the most important things I learned was it's all about the community. And so immediately when the RFP was announced, I started talking with the association, the commercial development entity, East Warren Development Corporation, asking them what they wanted to see on their corridor, and ultimately getting to a point where they knew who I was, because I also knew that based off of the RFP, the community had a say-so as to who was going to be developing this project. All right, it wasn't just Invest Detroit, but the community also had a say-so. Morningside, East English Village, Cornerstone, they have representation from all of these different communities. And so I made it my #1 goal to once again get in front of these folks as best as I can. Now, with that said, submitted the RFP, did our presentation, and the feedback I got was I was the only developer that talked to the community. More feedback and more discovery, I found out that with a room full of, 40 potential developers, when they had the open house the day of, I think, February or so, only 5 RFPs were submitted. And so another point I want to make is, if you see a project, if there's an opportunity, you submit for that opportunity. You may not get it, but you'd be surprised at how few people are going to submit for that same opportunity that you may have identified for one reason or another. All right, so I just wanted to point that out. But
I was there.
what's that?
I was there.
You were there too, yes. It was a room full of folks.
Yeah,
Yep.
crowded.
Absolutely. And so ultimately, we were, and throughout the process of coming up with a concept for this site, and let me back up just a bit, because when you're putting an RFP together, you have to put together, team. All right, we're talking architect, we're talking GC, and with me having experience solely in the single-family realm, when I reached out to GCs and architects to potentially be a part of my RFP, a lot of GCs and architects wouldn't respond back to my email, give me a call back, and or say that they'll show up and walk the site with me and not show. And I'm not putting them in a scenario where I'm talking about them. It's just the fact that my experience and the lack of skilled trades and good GCs and good architects in our area is few and far between, to a point where they possibly looked at other opportunities and saw better chances of working with somebody else and spending their time elsewhere with other projects as opposed to mine. With that said, I was able to be introduced at the open house to the architect that I'm using now, and I'm going to introduce you to them shortly, who then in turn introduced me to my GC. And I just, really appreciate that they stuck with me throughout this whole concept and process, because, we went 3 years without having this project closed. It took us 3 years to get to the closing table, and they didn't make any money during that time. Well, actually, the architect did make a little bit of money throughout the pre-development process, but my GC didn't. And my GC was actually the one that pushed me to say, at first I wanted to do only commercial for this site. And my GC said, why don't you go vertical? 5 more minutes. And so when my GC said go vertical, I'm like, well, shit, I'm going vertical. Our proposal is going to incorporate residential as well. So he gave me the confidence to actually, flesh out a concept as to what you're standing in now. And so I just want to really make sure I, give them their flowers. But at the end of the day, I just want you to know that, you can put anything you put your mind to, right? I know that sounds corny. I know that sounds, but at the end of the day, you have the potential, you have the power to be able to execute your vision. You just have to believe in yourself. You have to execute more specifically. A lot of times we have ideas and, we sit on those ideas, and you look up 1, 2, 3 years later, you're still sitting on that idea. if you got an idea, if you have a concept, if you potentially have the ability, to get a property under contract, let's make that happen. And, this is what you're here for, right? But just a word of warning is, development is one of the hardest things to do in real estate. And so, you have so many different hats you have to wear. You have so much of a time frame that you have to, go from the idea phase to the completion phase. It averages about 5 years to complete a project. And in this scenario, we're at year 4. And if you were to ask me how much money I've made up until this point, or recuperated based off of what I put in, which we can talk about, the equity that I put in, which is a little bit lower than typical. But with that said, I'm at about roughly 35 grand, in terms of what I was able to recuperate from this project over, roughly 4 years up to this point. So imagine working anywhere from 20 to 40 hours a week, all of these different headaches, all of these different hats you gotta wear. And, right now I've been able to recoup around 35 grand, in 4 years time. Now, the goal or the play is more so, obviously appreciation in the long-term play. And I'm hoping to use this as an example for more projects because, at the end of the day, I want to develop more. Once you kind of learn these set of skills, or you go through this overall experience, you get to a point where you're like, I can do it again, right? So, but let me stop rambling. I want to introduce my GC, Shane with Artisan Contracting, and I want to have him give a few words.
Good evening, everyone. Shane Overby, Artisan Contracting. I've been in construction a little bit over 22 years. Been working with Eddie on this one for 3 or 4 years. It's been a great project so far. We've loved doing it. Love to do more of these with him. Just really appreciate the relationship that we've been able to harvest over the last several years.
All right, so talk to us about, I guess, the biggest challenge for this project up until this point.
I think your relationship with your general contractor is really important. I remember we were in the throes of COVID and everything was still locked down, and we were working with the architects and we were trying to decide how to build this thing and what materials to use. And we basically had a big decision to make between one material or the other. And at the time, lumber prices were just sky high because of COVID, and we had to make the call to draw the plans with that at the time. Not having a crystal ball to look into to understand where prices were going to be at 2 or 3 years down the road. We certainly didn't want to redraw the plans to go with a different material. So it took a lot of just kind of putting our heads together and coming up with the best plan, I would say.
All right, and you'll be able to actually have conversations with Shane. If you have any questions with regard to, one more thing, GC versus construction manager.
General contractor or construction manager. It's really kind of semantics, but the main difference is construction manager, which is how we behave on this and pretty much all projects. Everything's open book, so we see every bid. Eddie has a chance to look at every bid and say, why are we spending so much money on tile? And I say, well, Eddie, you picked out a tile that's $30 a square foot. We can get that number down. You just have to pick a less expensive tile. And again, it's just a lot of back and forth between us and the developer to make sure that we're staying on budget. And it's a lot easier to do when you keep that open book. And then if you're under budget in one line item, it goes down further in the budget where you might be over budget on something else. So that's kind of the main difference.
Interior design, not at this moment, to save a little bit of money on the budget, but we're just figuring it out. So if you don't like the colors when the ribbon cutting is out, you can blame that on me. So I want to bring Joe Hudak with Infuse Architects to talk a little bit about their entity as well.
How's it going? Joe Hudak from Infuse Architects, as Eddie said. He's the architectural designer on this project. Here from the beginning as well. Remember when this was an old bank and we were in here, looking and what we can do and how we can kind of take this vacant urban space that was a vacant bank. Sorry, and turn it into something great. And at that time, you know, the avenue was slated for its redevelopment, and we ultimately wanted to kind of jump on that catalyst that those streets provide. You know, that streetscape provide a lot of energy here in this neighborhood, in this community, and it's just incredible to see, you know, how much that's changed over the couple years, and find that this is a great cornerstone project kind of for this entire neighborhood. And I think one thing with it, like you said, going vertical, I think this is the first multifamily project and along the avenue, providing some variety in the housing that's here, and very much looking forward to the kind of restaurant that will be here in this space that we're standing in, with the plaza out here, just kind of.
Really quickly, talk
Yeah.
about the traditional Main Street overlay and how it benefited the design and or challenged.
Exactly. You know, the traditional Main Street here with the avenue, as I was kind of mentioning, you know, has some strict guidelines on what it needs to have a, you know, cohesive design idea. So I think this project, because it being such a new construction project, that it starts to set the tone for the rest of this avenue here. So there's some little subtleties with the parking screens and things like that, some landscaping as well, which will really start to, you know, green up the sidewalk and pedestrian experience that we're gonna have here. So.
Perfect. All right, so I think we're out of time as far as talking, but I think they're gonna send one group up as well as.
Question and answer.
Okay, question and answer. Yes.
Hi, would you mind talking about your finance, like your sources for financing and how that works?
So this was a new market tax credit deal, and so we have, for the capital stack, we have Invest Detroit and Capital Impact partnering on the senior debt. We also have a grant from MDBC of about $1.5 million. We also have Lisk, who has a small loan as well as preferred equity. And what am I missing? And then the new markets funding, which was, from my understanding, one of the most challenging overall capital stacks to kind of get to a point where you can get to the closing table. But luckily, the institution I was working with, Capital Impact, or them and Invest Detroit, they were really helpful at kind of helping us get to the point where we can get it closed. But as far as equity, I have a pretty low amount of equity and I don't want to skew your expectations as far as what it takes to get a project like this stood up. But I have a very low amount of equity baked into this project. So to not say it on camera, you know, if you want to have conversations about that, you can always come to me and we can talk about that.
Did you get any money for the housing part?
Yes. Yep. So
Like
so Lisk, the preferred equity was due to us baking in a certain percent of our units at 50% AMI, 60% AMI, and so yes, yep, which was very helpful because the preferred equity component is really beneficial and kind of hard to get in today's market.
So you coming from the single family home space, this being your first major development, what's been your biggest lesson that you learned or challenge in dealing with like a larger scale development?
Yes, that's a great question. So what's the biggest lesson learned from single family to larger projects? Honestly, one more question. Okay. Honestly, this is my first project, but honestly, this has been easier than rehabbing single-family properties in the city of Detroit. And I'm assuming you understand why, right? You know, I have a construction manager / GC that has a great team, and they're responsible for the subcontractors. And, you know, that ultimately allows for me to have more of a hands-off approach when it comes to the more, you know, the headachy types of things that you have to deal with as a developer or an owner. Not to mention my GC is bonded, so, you know, that's a good thing too, because, you know, at the end of the day, if the GC decides to walk off the site, you know, there's insurance that covers that. Not saying Shane is gonna do that, but, you know, those things obviously cost, you know, that type of service costs, but when it comes to, you know, the amount of energy and effort and the amount of headaches, it's actually been less for this project, which is an $8.2 million project comparative to, you know, this $5,000 land bank property that I bought. Somebody busted out all my windows and stole my cabinets and all types of other headaches. So, one more question.
Can you describe like what your team looked like? So I know you're the developer. Like, what did your team look like from when you first started and you wanted this idea to become what it is today?
Yeah, so team-wise, it's interesting because I tried to convince people who, I always looked at it and I said, there's no way I'm gonna be able to get my first project with just me. And so I went on this spree of talking with more experienced developers and team members to try to stack the RFP as best as I can. You know, and most other developers that I talked to were more or less, you know, doing their own thing, and it was a little more challenging to convince them to be a part of the project. There was one person that I was working with, but we couldn't get the contract in order to make it official. And so it ultimately ended up being just me.